Have you ever wondered what sparked the most devastating war in human history, World War II? This global conflict wasn't born out of nowhere. It was the culmination of unresolved issues from the war to end all wars, World War I, and a volatile mix of economic instability, territorial disputes, and the rise of extremist ideologies. After World War I, the victorious Allied powers imposed severe reparations on Germany, leading to hyperinflation and economic despair. This financial chaos created fertile ground for the growth of radical ideologies. In Germany, Italy, and Japan, fascism found its footing, promising strong leadership and national restoration amidst the chaos. In Germany, a charismatic and ambitious man named Adolf Hitler rose to power. With his expansionist policies and dreams of a German empire, Hitler systematically violated the Treaty of Versailles, which had ended World War I. He remilitarized the Rhineland, united with Austria in the Anschluss, and annexed the Sudetenland, all while the world watched, paralyzed by a desire to avoid another war. Meanwhile, Italy under Benito Mussolini harbored its own territorial ambitions, invading Ethiopia in open defiance of the League of Nations. Japan too had imperial aspirations, occupying Manchuria and waging war against China. However, it was Hitler's invasion of Poland in September 1939 that was the final straw. Ignoring international pleas and threats, Hitler's armies stormed Poland, demonstrating the power of their blitzkrieg or lightning war tactics. This blatant act of aggression left the international community with no choice but to respond. Britain and France declared war on Germany, marking the beginning of World War II. So, what started World War II? It wasn't a singular event, but a complex web of factors: the lingering bitterness from World War I, the economic instability that followed, territorial disputes, and the rise of fascist ideologies in Germany, Italy, and Japan. And at the heart of it all were Hitler's ambitions and expansionist policies, which lit the fuse for the conflict. So the seeds of World War II were sown in the aftermath of its predecessor, fueled by economic turmoil, territorial greed, and ideological extremism. The stage was set, alliances were formed, but who were the major players in this global conflict? The Axis powers, a formidable trio, consisted of Nazi Germany under the iron grip of Adolf Hitler, Italy under the charismatic yet ruthless Benito Mussolini, and Imperial Japan, with Emperor Hirohito and Prime Minister Hideki Tojo at the helm. These nations, bound by similar ideologies and shared ambitions, formed a dark alliance that would sweep across continents. On the other side of the battlefield, the Allied powers stood. The United States, led by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin, the United Kingdom with Winston Churchill at the helm, and China under Chiang Kai-shek's leadership, along with other nations, united to challenge the Axis onslaught. Despite diverse political systems and historical tensions, these allies found common ground in their commitment to restore peace and uphold international law. These alliances set the stage for a global conflict unlike any the world had seen before. Let's look into the European theater, where some of the war's most significant battles took place. The European theater of World War II was a vast and brutal battleground, with conflicts stretching from the Atlantic Ocean to the heartland of Russia. The war in Europe officially began on September 1st, 1939, when Germany, under the control of Adolf Hitler, invaded Poland. This unprovoked act of aggression marked the beginning of Hitler's expansionist policies, which would eventually encompass the entire continent. The invasion of Poland was followed by the fall of France in June 1940. The German war machine was unstoppable, and within 6 weeks, France was forced to surrender. The defeat led to the establishment of the Vichy government, a puppet regime under German control, further solidifying Hitler's hold over Europe. However, the United Kingdom remained defiant. The Battle of Britain, fought in the skies over the English Channel, saw the Royal Air Force hold off the German Luftwaffe, preserving Britain as a crucial base for the Allied resistance. But the tide of war would not turn until the Allies began reclaiming territory from the Axis powers. The Battle of Stalingrad, from August 1942 to February 1943, was a devastating confrontation between Germany and the Soviet Union. It marked a significant turning point, with the Soviet Union successfully halting the German advance into Eastern Europe. Another pivotal moment came with the Normandy invasion, or D-Day, on June 6, 1944. This massive amphibious assault marked the beginning of the end for the Axis powers in Europe, as the Allied forces began their push towards Germany. The final stage in the European theater was the Battle of Berlin. In April 1945, Soviet forces stormed the German capital, leading to the eventual surrender of Germany and the end of Hitler's reign. The European theater was a stage of immense destruction and decisive battles, shaping the course of the war. While Europe was embroiled in conflict, a storm was brewing in the East. Welcome to the Pacific Theater. Here, Imperial Japan was nurturing ambitious expansionist goals. The nation had its eyes set on the rich resources of Asia and the Pacific, aiming to establish what they termed as the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere. This grand plan was essentially a euphemism for a Japanese empire where Japan would dominate and control the entire region. However, these ambitions were not without obstacles. The United States in particular stood in Japan's way. This led to the infamous surprise attack on Pearl Harbor in Hawaii on December 7, 1941. This audacious assault resulted in substantial damage to the United States Pacific Fleet and the loss of over 2,400 lives. The United States, which had been previously reluctant to get involved in the conflict, was now thrust into the war. Following Pearl Harbor, the Pacific War saw numerous pivotal battles. One of the most significant was the Battle of Midway in June 1942. This battle was a decisive victory for the United States, effectively turning the tide against Japanese expansion. The United States, utilizing superior intelligence and strategy, managed to sink 4 Japanese aircraft carriers, dealing a crippling blow to the Japanese Navy. Another key battle was the Battle of Okinawa in April 1945. This was one of the bloodiest battles of the Pacific War, with high casualties on both sides. The United States' victory here paved the way for a planned invasion of mainland Japan, but the dropping of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 would ultimately bring the war in the Pacific to a swift and devastating conclusion. The Pacific Theater saw the rise of a new superpower as America was pulled into the conflict. The United States emerged from the Pacific War as a dominant global force, setting the stage for the geopolitical landscape of the post-war world. In the midst of this global conflict, a dark chapter of human history was written: the Holocaust. A chilling manifestation of hate, the Holocaust saw the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews by the Nazis. It was a calculated and methodical plan of extermination, a crime against humanity that remains unparalleled in its brutality. Jews from all walks of life, all ages and backgrounds were targeted, their lives cut short by an ideology that deemed them less than human. Yet the Holocaust was not an isolated act of violence. It was part of a broader pattern of persecution that swept across Europe under the Nazi regime. Roma, disabled people, homosexuals, and political dissidents all were targeted in what was essentially a purge of those who did not fit into the Nazis' vision of a master race. But the atrocities of World War II were not confined to the Holocaust. Far from it. The conflict saw a range of war crimes and acts of violence that shock the conscience. In the East, for instance, the Japanese army committed horrendous acts of violence, such as the infamous Nanking Massacre, where hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians and disarmed soldiers were brutally murdered and tens of thousands of women were raped. In the Soviet Union, millions of people were deported, executed, or died in gulags under Stalin's oppressive regime. And let's not forget the Allied bombing campaigns that resulted in significant civilian casualties. The Holocaust and these other atrocities serve as a stark reminder of the depths to which humanity can sink in times of conflict. They remind us of the capacity for cruelty that can be unleashed when hatred, fear, and prejudice are allowed to fester unchecked. But most importantly, they remind us of the need to learn from our past, to ensure that such horrors are never repeated. Because, in the end, the best way to honor the victims of these atrocities is to strive for a world where every human life is valued and respected. The Holocaust and other atrocities remind us of the depths to which humanity can sink in times of conflict. War, as horrific as it is, often drives rapid advancements in technology. World War II was no exception. The grim necessities of warfare led to the creation of nuclear weapons, a technology that holds the power to destroy entire cities in an instant. It was a game changer, introducing a new level of potential devastation to the world stage. Radar technology, too, took a quantum leap forward during the war, enhancing not only military strategy, but also revolutionizing air travel in the years to come. Tanks and aircraft became deadlier, faster, and more reliable, altering the dynamics of ground and air combat. The war also spurred advancements in medicine, from antibiotics to treat wounded soldiers, to the development of blood transfusion and storage techniques. Communication technology also underwent a transformation, with the advent of more sophisticated encryption and decryption devices. The technological leaps made during World War II continue to shape our world today. While soldiers fought on the front lines, civilians back home faced their own battles. World War II was not just a war of soldiers and battlefields, it was also a war of homes and civilians. From the bustling streets of London to the quiet villages of rural France, ordinary people found their lives turned upside down by the far-reaching impacts of the war. Cities and towns were regularly targeted by bombings, causing widespread destruction and loss of life. The German Blitz on Britain and the Allied bombing of German cities transformed urban landscapes into rubble and forced civilians into a daily struggle for survival amidst the ruins. Rationing became a part of everyday life as governments sought to ensure that vital resources were directed towards the war effort. Bread, butter, sugar, meat, everything was rationed. This not only required people to make do with less, but also fostered a spirit of ingenuity and resourcefulness as they found new ways to stretch their limited supplies. Displacement was another harsh reality. Millions were forced to leave their homes due to conflict or persecution, resulting in a massive refugee crisis. Families were torn apart, and many had to start anew in unfamiliar lands, forever marked by the traumas of war. Forced labor, too, was a grim aspect of this period. Civilians in occupied territories were often compelled to work for the occupying forces, enduring harsh conditions and brutal treatment. Yet, amidst these hardships, we see the emergence of new roles and opportunities, particularly for women. With men away fighting, women stepped into roles traditionally held by men. They worked in factories, offices and farms, keeping the wheels of industry and agriculture turning. They served as nurses, air raid wardens, and even pilots. This shift not only kept the home front running, but also challenged traditional gender roles, paving the way for greater gender equality in the post-war period. The war touched every aspect of life, transforming societies and challenging traditional roles. In 1945, the guns fell silent. But what was the aftermath of this tremendous conflict? The Axis powers, after years of devastating warfare, laid down their arms and surrendered unconditionally. The world breathed a sigh of relief, but the echoes of the war were far from over. In response to the vast devastation and the quest for lasting peace, nations came together to form the United Nations. This intergovernmental organization was created with the hope of preventing such a catastrophic conflict from ever recurring. But as one conflict ended, another was just beginning to take shape. Europe, battered and bruised, was divided into East and West. The Iron Curtain descended, cleaving the continent into two distinct spheres of influence, each led by a superpower, the United States and the Soviet Union. This division was the spark that ignited the Cold War, a conflict of ideologies that would dominate the globe for decades. The end of World War II marked the beginning of a new era of geopolitics. The echoes of World War II can still be heard today. But how has it shaped our world? World War II, a cataclysmic period in our history, has left an indelible mark on the fabric of our global society. The war's profound impact continues to reverberate through the corridors of time, influencing global politics, societies, and economies in ways that are both overt and subtle. In the realm of global politics, the war brought forth a seismic shift in power dynamics. The emergence of the United States and the Soviet Union as superpowers set the stage for the Cold War, a tense standoff that would define international relations for nearly half a century. At the same time, the war hastened the decline of European colonial empires, paving the way for the independence of numerous nations across Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. As for societies, the war forever changed the way we view and uphold human rights. The unspeakable atrocities of the Holocaust led to the establishment of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, underscoring the inherent dignity and worth of every individual. This landmark document laid the foundation for future human rights treaties and continues to serve as a beacon of hope and justice for oppressed peoples worldwide. Economically, the war resulted in a massive redistribution of wealth and resources. The Marshall Plan, a U.S. initiative to aid Western Europe, rebuilt war-torn economies, while in the East, the Soviet Union exerted its influence to establish communist regimes. This division of resources and ideologies played a significant role in shaping the world's economic landscape in the post-war period. Finally, the war sparked a technological revolution. From radar to computers to nuclear power, the drive to gain a strategic edge led to innovations that continue to shape our lives today. These advancements, born out of necessity, forever transform the way we live, work, and fight. World War II, a conflict of unparalleled destruction, continues to shape our world. Well, that's all the time we had today. If you enjoyed this video, why don't you do us a favor? Smash that like button, and thank you for watching.